November 3, 1944. A German corporal from the 183rd Volksgrenadier Division sat in an American interrogation tent outside Stolberg, hands still shaking. The interrogator asked him a routine question. Which American division captured you? The corporal's face went pale. Die Nacht-Kämpfer, he whispered, the night fighters. The interrogator pressed for details. The corporal leaned forward and said something that would appear in intelligence reports all the way up to Eisenhower's headquarters. You don't fight fair. You come when we can't see you. Your general is a gangster, not a soldier. The interrogator wrote down the name the Germans had started using. Terry Allen. Terrible Terry. The corporal wasn't exaggerating. Across the Siegfried Line, German commanders were warning their troops about the American division that attacked exclusively at night, led by a general who'd been court-martialed twice, fired from his first command, and sent back to war with explicit orders to prove everyone wrong. Think about that assessment. German soldiers who'd faced Patton, Montgomery, and Bradley were more terrified of the one general the American High Command had tried to bury. But here's what those German intelligence officers didn't know. The man they feared wasn't supposed to be in Germany at all. He had been fired 18 months earlier for being too aggressive, too undisciplined, too dangerous to control. Bradley had written him off as a liability. Patton had failed to protect him. Eisenhower had signed the order ending his combat career. And yet here he was, commanding an untested division that had become the most feared American unit on the Western Front. What happened between August 1943 and November 1944 wasn't just a redemption story. It was proof that the most dangerous generals are the ones nobody can control. Because Terry Allen wasn't fighting Germans anymore. He was fighting the entire United States Army command structure. And he was winning both wars simultaneously. Terry Allen arrived at West Point in 1907 with military service coded into his DNA. His father was an Army colonel. His grandfather had charged up Cemetery Ridge at Gettysburg. 4 generations of Allens had worn the uniform. But Terry was different from the polished cadets around him. He had severe dyslexia that turned reading into agony. Words scrambled on the page. Sentences reversed themselves mid-paragraph. Academic work that took other cadets an hour required Allen 4. He compensated by memorizing everything. Entire textbooks, lecture notes read aloud by sympathetic roommates, mathematics proofs that he couldn't write but could recite perfectly. But West Point wasn't designed for cadets who learned differently. In his second year, he failed mathematics. He repeated the year. Then he failed ordnance and gunnery in 1911. The academy dismissed him. Most men would have accepted defeat. The Army had spoken. Find another career, become a lawyer, inherit the family ranch. Allen enrolled at Catholic University in Washington. He completed ROTC training, and in 1912, he entered the United States Army as a commissioned officer through the back door. The West Point graduates looked down on him. He wasn't one of them. He hadn't survived the crucible. He hadn't earned his commission the proper way. Allen didn't care. He was exactly where he wanted to be, and he was about to prove that West Point's standards measured the wrong things. World War I turned Terry Allen into a legend among enlisted men and a permanent problem for his superiors. By age 30, he commanded an infantry battalion in the 90th Division. Regulations said battalion commanders should direct operations from headquarters 1 mile behind the front lines. Allen led patrols personally into no man's land. He crawled through barbed wire at midnight to observe German positions. He carried a rifle and fought alongside his men when the situation required it. September 26, 1918, the Meuse-Argonne offensive. Allen's battalion attacked German machine gun nests in the Argonne forest. A burst of machine gun fire tore through his jaw, shattering bone and ripping through his throat. Most officers would have accepted the medical evacuation. The wound was severe enough to end any man's combat career with honor. Allen talked the doctors into sending him back to his battalion before the wound fully healed. He showed up at the front line 3 days later, still bleeding through the bandages, unable to speak clearly, giving orders through written notes.
His men didn't know whether to be inspired or horrified. They settled on both. His superiors found him impossible. He drank too much off duty. He ignored regulations he considered stupid. He treated military ceremonies as theatrical wastes of time better spent training. But he won. Every single engagement his battalion fought ended in American victory, and his men would have followed him into hell without question. The peacetime army didn't know what to do with officers like that. After the armistice, Allen returned to a military that valued parade ground discipline over combat effectiveness. He bounced between cavalry posts in Texas and Arizona. He got into trouble for unauthorized training exercises. He got out of trouble because his men consistently outperformed other units. By 1940, Lieutenant Colonel Terry Allen was being chewed out by his regimental commander for yet another breach of protocol. Then a telegram arrived that changed everything. Allen had been promoted to brigadier general, skipping the permanent rank of colonel entirely. George Marshall had personally intervened. The Army Chief of Staff was rebuilding the military for the war everyone knew was coming. He needed combat leaders, not officers who looked good in dress uniforms. Marshall wrote that Allen was outstanding as a leader who could do anything with men and officers, though unprepossessing in appearance and apparently casual in manner. Translation: Allen looked like a slob but fought like a demon. In May 1942, Marshall gave Allen command of the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. It was one of the most prestigious assignments in the Army. Allen was about to meet the man who would try to break him, fail, and then watch him succeed anyway. George Patton was everything the Army wanted a general to be: West Point graduate, wealthy family, Olympic athlete in the 1912 games. He looked like central casting had designed him for a war movie. He demanded absolute obedience. His soldiers feared him more than they feared the enemy. Patton believed discipline and aggression won wars. He was half right. But he was about to discover that aggression without discipline could be even more effective in the right hands. When Patton took command of the Western Task Force for Operation Torch in 1942, he inherited Terry Allen's 1st Division. What he saw intrigued him. Allen's men didn't look like soldiers. Their uniforms were permanently wrinkled. They wore unauthorized gear stripped from British and French units. They walked with the casual slouch of longshoremen, not the crisp bearing of infantry. But they moved with a confidence that caught Patton's attention. These men weren't afraid of anything, not the Germans, not their officers, not Patton himself. Patton called Allen to his headquarters for their first official meeting. He expected Allen to arrive in a pressed uniform, spit-shined boots, showing proper respect for rank. Allen showed up in a dirty field uniform with his collar unbuttoned and mud still caked on his boots. Patton started to dress him down for disrespecting the chain of command. Then Allen interrupted him. "General, are we here to fight Germans or impress inspection officers?" Patton's aide later told reporters the silence that followed lasted an eternity. Then Patton laughed. "Get out of my office, Allen, and take Casablanca." Allen took Casablanca. Then he took Iran. Then his division stopped Rommel's counterattack at Kasserine Pass when every other American unit was retreating in chaos. Patton watched Allen's victories accumulate and made a calculated decision. He could break Allen and turn the 1st Division into a conventional unit that followed orders, or he could unleash Allen and watch him tear through the Africa Corps like a chainsaw through timber. Patton chose the chainsaw, but there was a price for that choice. Allen's men started acting like they owned North Africa. They raided supply depots that belonged to other divisions. They got into massive brawls with British troops in Tunis over who had liberated what territory. One night in March 1943, Allen's soldiers beat up an entire platoon of Patton's own military police after the MPs tried to arrest them for looting a wine warehouse. The MPs filed a formal complaint directly to Patton's headquarters. Patton threw the complaint in the trash. Omar Bradley was watching all of this with growing alarm. Bradley was Patton's deputy commander for 2nd Corps.
He believed discipline was the foundation of an effective army. When he saw Patton protecting Allen, he started documenting every infraction in a leather notebook he kept in his desk. The bar fight in Matur, the supply depot raid in Bizerte, the fist fight between Allen's men and the 45th Division over captured German vehicles. Bradley took his notebook to Patton and demanded action. Patton looked at the list and said something Bradley would never forget. "Bradley, you're keeping score like this is a goddamn tennis match. Allen is winning a war." Bradley tried to argue that Allen's behavior was undermining coalition unity and making American commanders look weak. Patton cut him off. "The British respect one thing, winning. Allen wins. Now get out of my office." That conversation marked the beginning of Bradley's campaign to destroy Allen. He just needed Patton out of the way first.
Here's what Bradley didn't write about in his notebook. While Allen's men were brawling in rear-area towns, they were perfecting a form of warfare that would terrorize German defenders for the next 2 years: night attacks. During daylight, German artillery observers and machine gunners turned every American advance into a bloodbath. Attacking in daylight meant crossing open ground under direct observation. It meant casualties of 30, 40, sometimes 50% before reaching the objective. But at night, the equation reversed. German gunners couldn't hit what they couldn't see. American infantry could close the distance before defenders even knew they were coming. The problem was that American soldiers weren't trained for it. The Army Manual recommended 8 to 12 hours per week of night operations training. Allen required 30 to 35 hours. His men practiced moving in complete darkness without flashlights. They learned to navigate by compass and stars. They rehearsed attacks until they could execute complex maneuvers without speaking a single word. Patton watched one of these night drills outside Tunis in May 1943. He stood on a hillside with his staff, watching 3,000 men move through the darkness below without making a sound. No flashlights, no shouted orders, just the occasional whisper of boots on sand. Patton was mesmerized. He told his chief of staff, "That son of a bitch has invented something new." What Patton didn't realize was that Allen was building the prototype for every night operation American forces would conduct for the rest of the war. In July 1943, the Allies invaded Sicily. Patton commanded the American 7th Army. Bernard Montgomery commanded the British 8th Army. Patton specifically requested Terry Allen's 1st Division for the most dangerous landing at Gela. He knew Allen could handle it. What he didn't know was that Allen was about to disobey direct orders in front of the entire Allied High Command, and Patton wouldn't be able to protect him this time. July 10, 1943. The 1st Division landed on the beaches at Gela. Within hours, German panzers from the Hermann Göring Division counterattacked with 90 tanks, trying to push the Americans back into the Mediterranean. Allen's troops stopped them cold, using captured German anti-tank guns and pure aggression. But then Allen did something that made Patton's blood boil. Instead of consolidating the beachhead as ordered, Allen pushed inland, hard and fast. His battalions advanced so rapidly they left the flanking divisions behind, creating a dangerous salient that exposed them to German counterattack from 3 sides. Every tactical manual said this was suicide. Allen didn't care. He could see the Germans were disorganized and retreating. If he stopped now, they would dig in, and American boys would spend 3 months bleeding them out of mountain positions. July 22nd, Patton drove to the front personally to order Allen to pull back. He found Allen standing on a ridge, watching his battalions disappear into the Sicilian interior. "What the hell are you doing, Allen? I ordered you to hold the beachhead." Allen didn't even turn around. "The Germans are running, General. If we stop now, they'll fortify the mountains, and we'll pay for every mile in blood." Patton grabbed Allen's shoulder and spun him around. "I gave you a direct order." Allen looked Patton in the eye without blinking and said, "Then you can relieve me, sir, but my men are staying on those Germans."
Think about the audacity of that moment. A division commander just told a field army commander to go to hell, then offered his resignation rather than obey. Patton had two choices: fire Allen on the spot and prove to Eisenhower he couldn't control his own subordinates, or let Allen keep advancing and pray he was right. Patton chose option 2. If you lose a single battalion to a counterattack, Allen, I will personally court-martial you. Allen smiled. I won't lose a battalion, sir. Then he walked away before Patton could respond. Allen was right. The Germans never counterattacked the salient. The 1st Division cracked open the entire German defensive line and allowed Patton's 7th Army to race Montgomery to Messina. It was a brilliant tactical gambit that saved thousands of American lives. It was also blatant insubordination that Bradley documented in minute detail. Patton tried to smooth things over with Eisenhower, writing that Allen was the finest combat leader he had ever seen, but admitting he was completely uncontrollable. Eisenhower read that report and made a decision that would change Allen's life. Ike called Bradley and told him to find a replacement for Allen. Patton found out about the order and exploded. He drove to Bradley's headquarters and told him that firing Allen would be the stupidest personnel decision of this entire war. Bradley looked at Patton with cold satisfaction and said, "It's already done. Allen is being relieved in 48 hours." Patton went over Bradley's head directly to Eisenhower. He argued Allen had saved the Sicily invasion. He pointed out Allen's division had the highest combat effectiveness rating in the theater. He even threatened to resign if Allen was fired. Eisenhower listened patiently, then ended the argument. "George, you've been protecting Allen for 8 months. In that time, his division has become a gang, not a military unit. If we take them to France like this, they'll be a liability."
Patton knew Eisenhower was right. He had created this problem by refusing to discipline Allen. Now someone else would pay the price. On August 7, 1943, Omar Bradley called Terry Allen to 2 Corps headquarters. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. Allen was relieved of command of the 1st Infantry Division. So was his assistant division commander, Theodore Roosevelt, Jr. The official reason? Discipline problems. The real reason? Patton had lost his battle to save them. Patton didn't attend the change of command ceremony. He couldn't watch. He sent his chief of staff with a private message for Allen. "Tell Terry I fought like hell for him. Tell him I'm sorry." Allen received the message on a transport ship heading back to the United States. He crumpled it up and threw it over the side into the Atlantic. As far as Allen was concerned, Patton's apology came 6 months too late. What neither Patton nor Allen knew was that George Marshall had been watching the entire drama unfold, and Marshall had very different ideas about what Terry Allen deserved. October 15, 1943. Terry Allen stood before a formation of soldiers at Camp Adair, Oregon. These weren't battle-hardened veterans. These were draftees and recent enlistees who had never heard a shot fired in combat. The 104th Infantry Division, nicknamed the Timberwolves. George Marshall had intervened again. Just 2 months after Bradley declared Allen unfit for command, Marshall gave him another division. 2 months. Think about that timeline. Bradley fires the guy, and Marshall hands him another division before the paperwork is even filed. Marshall's message was crystal clear. He didn't care what Patton thought. He didn't care what Bradley wanted. He needed combat leaders, not politicians in uniforms. And Terry Allen was about to prove that Marshall's judgment was better than all of theirs combined. Allen looked at the raw troops in front of him and saw potential. He would build this division from nothing. He would train them in the tactics that had broken German divisions in Sicily, and he would create something that would make Bradley regret ever writing his name in that leather notebook. The training began that afternoon. Allen immediately reinstated the brutal night fighting regimen he had perfected with the 1st Division. While standard divisions trained 8 to 12 hours per week for night operations, the Timberwolves lived in darkness, 30 to 35 hours every single week. They learned to move without flashlights or moonlight. They practiced hand signals that worked when voices would give away positions. They rehearsed attacks until every soldier knew exactly where to be without being told.
Allen was ruthless about it. He drove his men to exhaustion. He failed entire companies and made them repeat training cycles. But this time, it wasn't just about winning battles. It was personal. Every successful night drill was a silent rebuke to Bradley. Every soldier who mastered darkness was proof that Allen's methods worked. He was forging the Timberwolves into a weapon that would make his critics look like amateurs. The division adopted a motto: "Nothing in hell must stop the Timberwolves." By August 1944, they were ready. Allen loaded his division onto transport ships bound for Europe. He was going back to war, and this time, nobody would be able to stop him. October 23, 1944. The 104th Division entered combat in the Netherlands. Allen attacked at night. His Timberwolves advanced 15 miles in 5 days through flooded polders that had stalled other divisions for weeks. Montgomery sent personal congratulations to Allen. Then they hit the Siegfried Line, concrete pillboxes 6 feet thick, dragon's teeth anti-tank barriers, interlocking fields of fire designed to turn daylight assaults into suicide missions. Other American divisions had bled themselves white attacking these defenses under the sun. Allen's men attacked exclusively at night. They hit Stolberg on November 3rd. German defenders woke up to American soldiers already inside their bunkers. The town fell in 36 hours. Then Eschweiler, then Inden. Town after town captured in darkness while German commanders struggled to organize resistance against enemies they couldn't see. The Germans started calling the 104th the Nacht-Kämpfer, the night fighters. Prisoners told interrogators that fighting Allen's division was unfair. The Americans didn't follow the rules of warfare. They attacked when you couldn't see them. Normal defensive tactics didn't work. A German lieutenant from the 12th Infantry Division told his interrogator something that appeared in intelligence summaries across the theater. "Your General Allen is not a soldier. He's a gangster. He sends his men like thieves in the night. We cannot defend against what we cannot see." Another prisoner, a sergeant who had fought in North Africa and Normandy, said something even more revealing. "We feared Patton because he was fast. We respected Montgomery because he was thorough. But we are terrified of Allen because he is unpredictable. He attacks when we eat, when we sleep, when we think we are safe." Here's what those German prisoners didn't understand. Allen had invented those tactics in North Africa while Patton was protecting him from Bradley. Patton had watched Allen perfect them in Sicily while refusing to discipline him, and now he was using them to accomplish objectives that Patton's own Third Army couldn't take in daylight. Think about that irony. The general Patton couldn't control had become more effective than every general Patton could control.
December 1944. The Timberwolves smashed across the Ruhr River in a night assault that Third Army staff officers had declared impossible. January 1945, they breached the Siegfried Line at 3 separate points simultaneously, all at night, all without artillery preparation that would alert defenders. And in March, they reached Cologne, Germany's third largest city, a fortress that was supposed to require weeks of siege warfare. Allen took it in 4 days, using exclusively night attacks. By April 1945, Allen's division had crossed the Rhine River and was racing toward the Elbe River. They had fought for 195 consecutive days without relief. They had never yielded ground to a German counterattack. They had never failed to take an objective. The division that had been handed to Terry Allen as a consolation prize had become the most feared American fighting unit in the European theater, and George Patton was reading the after-action reports with growing regret. March 1945. Patton sat in his headquarters in Germany and wrote a letter to George Marshall. He never sent it. In the letter, Patton admitted that relieving Allen had been a mistake. He wrote that Allen's unorthodox methods were not a problem to be solved, but a weapon to be exploited. He acknowledged that his failure to protect Allen from Bradley had cost the Army 6 months of Allen's combat leadership. The letter sat in Patton's desk until his death in December 1945. He never had the courage to admit the mistake publicly. Omar Bradley never admitted he was wrong about Terry Allen. In 1951, Bradley's memoir, he defended the firing as necessary for unit cohesion and discipline. But Bradley's own staff officers told a different story decades later. They said Bradley had been jealous of Allen's combat reputation, that he had used discipline violations as an excuse to eliminate a rival who made him look cautious by comparison. Whether that's true doesn't matter anymore. What matters is the result. The general Bradley fired went on to build the most effective night fighting division in the war. German prisoners consistently rated the 104th among the American divisions they least wanted to face. British commanders studied Allen's night attack tactics and adopted them for their own units. Even the Red Army sent observers to document Allen's methods after the link-up at the Elbe River. The troublemaker who failed out of West Point twice had just taught the entire Allied coalition how to fight in darkness. The Timberwolves suffered nearly 5,000 casualties during their 91 days of combat, over 1,000 killed in action. Allen wrote hundreds of letters to families of men who died under his command, each one personal, each one acknowledging the specific sacrifice their son or husband had made. In one letter to a mother in Ohio, Allen wrote, "Your son died proving that unconventional warfare wins conventional battles. George Patton never understood that. Omar Bradley never accepted it, but your son lived it." That mother kept the letter for the rest of her life. When historians interviewed her in 1967, she said Allen's letter meant more than the medals the Army sent, because Allen told her the truth. Her son had died proving his commander right and his commander's superiors wrong. George Marshall's judgment had been vindicated. The general, who appeared on Time magazine cover 2 days after being fired, had led his 2nd Division to victory. The officer Patton couldn't control had proven that control was overrated when the alternative was combat effectiveness. Terry Allen retired from the Army in 1946. He never wrote a memoir. He never gave interviews about his conflicts with Patton or Bradley. When reporters asked him about being fired in Sicily, Allen said only, "They made their decision, I made mine. The war decided who was right." That quote is carved on his headstone at Arlington National Cemetery, right next to 2 words the Germans gave him, night fighter. The German corporal who sat in that interrogation tent outside Stolberg in November 1944 was right about one thing. Terry Allen was a gangster, but not the way the corporal meant it. Allen was a gangster because he refused to play by rules designed to protect careers instead of win wars. He was a gangster because he valued soldiers' lives over officers' reputations. He was a gangster because when everyone told him to fight one way, he invented a better way and proved them wrong. Patton couldn't control him, Bradley couldn't break him, Eisenhower couldn't stop him, but the Germans? The Germans learned to fear the sound of silence in the darkness, because silence meant Terry Allen was coming, and when Terry Allen came at night, there was nowhere to hide. The most gangster general of World War II wasn't the one with the pearl-handled revolvers and the ivory swagger stick. It was the one the Germans feared most, the one who fought like a gangster and won like a legend. Terrible Allen, the night fighter.